Everyone experiences individuals differently. Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jameelah, and I am a master manifester, and I'm sure you are too, because you are consuming content like this. The name of this channel is Holistic Manifesting, because I believe in a whole body, whole mind, and whole being experience when it comes to manifesting these amazing lives that we are choosing to live. What I'm discussing in this video is understanding that everybody experiences individuals in a different way. And this is something I was reminded of by my own daughter this recently, right? You know, when you raise children a certain kind of way, they can start giving you information back at you that you're like, hey, wait, I would have told you that. But I was talking about something related to somebody that we know dearly. And I was saying how this person is not perfect, but they have a lot of redeeming qualities, right, to me. And I was like, someone else was discussing them and they kind of just acted like the person is kind of the worst person in the world. And I was thinking to myself, like, how is that possible? Like, this person, blah, blah, blah. And then in the morning, it wasn't off my brain. I got in the car saying the same thing. And my daughter was like, you got to just remember that everybody has a different experience with people. And I'm like, that is like basic emotional intelligence 101. And I'm like, well, thank you for sharing that with me, right? Because I do know this, but sometimes I forget these things. So it's wonderful to hear it. We get so caught up on what we think is good behavior and what we think is bad behavior, what we think is acceptable and what we think is unacceptable. But what we don't realize is that all of that's based on our own personal perceptions. All of that's based on the areas in our lives where we were traumatized or the areas that we were affected in when we were a kid or even as we got older, right? Because all trauma doesn't happen just when you're a kid. Some of it happens later on in life. It doesn't really matter. And so like some of these things come up and that package that we are, the personality traits, the experiences that we had, the disappointments, the ups, the downs, the highs, the lows, all these things become a permanent part of who we are and how we address and how we approach the world. So when we come in contact with people, I'm going to get a different perspective on that person than the person sitting right next to me. And we've seen this everywhere, especially in workplace environments. And even if you do business and you consult with other people in different firms, you interact with other people on different levels, somebody can be sitting right next to you and have a very similar demographic background and everything like that matching. And they will be in love with this person and be like, but she's such an honorable person. And you're just like, that woman is full of crap. And it's based on what you two have experienced, like where you differ in those things that you think you have so much in common, but there are always ways in which that you differed. And then another aspect of it is too, how that particular individual treated the different people. I find I see this a lot in family setups, especially when it comes to parents. One child will say this parent is like, heaven on earth, right? And another child is like, show me proof, because I just don't see where this person was heaven on earth. I don't see where they were giving us and doing all these things and being this amazing person that you act like exists. But you cannot waste your time with that, with trying to get them to see something different, because that is how they experience that individual. Maybe that person was a light, in a very dark time for them at a different period in their life, and you didn't need that type of leaning on that person. So you had a different relationship with them. And sometimes depending on the different children's, temperament, parents treat the children differently based on that. And so we always want to say, oh, equality in the household and all that, and all the children are the same. But we already know we're flawed, if we want to say flawed, right? I just call it human beings. But to me, human beings and flawed beings are the same thing. But we're flawed, they're flawed. It's like they're going to come out and they may have a proclivity to treat somebody better who's of a certain mindset or a certain way of seeing the world. And then they may have a proclivity to be hard on somebody else who sees the world another way, right? And sometimes we don't understand, if I keep talking about parents as the example, that they sometimes don't like to see their own negative behaviors inside of their children. So if they see something that's familiar to them or something that they didn't like about themselves, they may treat that child differently and then honor this other one because they don't struggle with the same thing. And that happens very commonly. So then like when people, have conversations about their parents later on in the background, and one of them is just like, she was the worst person in the world. It's like, I just can't get with her, who she was and all that. And the other one's like, I think she was pretty great. I think she, gave a lot, showed a lot, did a lot, more than the other parent that we got, all this kind of stuff. Then that boils down to you experience that individual very differently. And that's okay. I think sometimes we forget that it's okay. And I'm a firm believer that when I see somebody, and I have to practice this more, and sometimes when we first discover that we don't like something about a parent, we want everybody to know. Or we don't like something about a family member, we want everybody to know. And it's not very important. And sometimes you want to break down these people's walls and how they see the person, and like, they're not that great. They don't do this, they don't do that, they don't do that. But you may be shattering a support system, even if it's perceived that they built up in their mind that they really, really, really need. And who are you to say that they're not experiencing those exact things from that person? Because at the end of the day, everything is about a feeling, right? If you feel protected and provided for by somebody, who am I to say that you weren't protected and provided for, depending on how we define that? If I say that I didn't, they can't tell me that I did feel that way when I'm telling you, no, I didn't feel protected or provided for. They can't tell me that that's not the experience that I had. So we just have to keep that in mind. You take this even into the workplace. A lot of times people have a problem with someone, or they have a problem with some way somebody's doing business, and they want everybody to line up with it. They want everybody to agree with everything they got going on. They want everybody to agree and say, this person is bad, this person is like this person is like that. And it's like, God forbid if that's just not the case. And so you'll see things like performance reviews that happen. And I've had this happen before too, with somebody who was like targeting me and had it out for me in a certain kind of way. And then a whole bunch of other people who thought I was amazing. And so I put all this information about connecting with them and working with them and all these people in their feedback. And they wrote letters and all this nice stuff. And then this one person still comes in and says, well, she's like this, she's like that. It's because they're experiencing me in different ways. One is experiencing me as like maybe somebody who's valuable, somebody who can bring positive things to the table, somebody who's direct and who's a straight talker and who gets work done, right? And this other person is experiencing me as somebody who's overshadowing them, or somebody who they feel is belittling them or talking down to them, when it's something that you probably never did, but based on what they've experienced and what they've come in contact with in life, they're going to see you how they choose to see you, right? So just keep that in mind. In life, sometimes we always try to give other people our experiences, or try to believe that other people should see the world or see a person the way that we did. And really, that's not true. And another reason is because they're not set up to get out of life what we're set up to get out of life. So maybe all those qualities that you thought was so great in that parent were things that you needed because they've taken you far. They put you where you wanted to be, like the strength, the resilience, the mindset, the ability to try at things and not worry about failing, the desire to always have something to give to others and all this kind of stuff like that. Part of them is like, you know what, I'm gonna latch on to that aspect of them because that's the part that serves me. Some other people may be latching on to the parts of them where they were treated a certain way as a child, where they were treated a certain way as a teenager, and they have the full right to do that. And so just because a person experiences somebody differently, it doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong, right? And this might be a little more nuanced and a little more niche in conversations that I normally have, but it's something that I thought about that we deal with often, especially in family dynamics. We want so bad for everybody to see this one as that, for everybody to see this person as this, for everybody to see this person as that. And sometimes people pull on a full-fledged campaign, a full-fledged social and familial campaign to try to get people to demonize somebody, but that's just not the way that you experience them. So what am I supposed to do? Jump on the bandwagon of your disappointment and your grief and what you didn't like about the way you dealt with the person and just say, yeah, and point the finger? Like, what kind of world we live in if everybody was doing that? Because people are doing that, but not everybody's doing it, right? Like what kind of world we live in if that was the case? We all have to make our own assessments, and we all get to decide, and we all get to choose. And that's the end of the day. That's what's so important, right? Especially in family dynamics, you can't run around acting like everybody needs to think this person is crazy. Everybody needs to think this person is selfish. Everybody needs to think this person is ugly. Because guess what? Everybody experiences those individuals very, very differently, and they should be allowed to, right? Whenever you get in those environments where people are like trying to convince you of how this person was this, how this person was that, I've seen people do it, and they'll spend all that time trying to convince people somebody was this, that, and that, and the other. And then at the end of the day, the person's like, well, I still just don't, that ain't my experience with them. And you just sat there and had all these conversations and tried to, collect minions and collect, people to go against them and to dislike them. And you may win some people over, right? You may win people over that were ready to dislike the person anyway, because that's literally what it is. They were ready to dislike the person anyway. You may win them over, but at the end of the day, you've accomplished nothing, because people still have the right to experience individuals differently from what you did. And individuals treat people differently based on their own backgrounds and their own information. So keep that in mind. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day.